She was twice my calm, half my chaos, and somehow, exactly what I needed. I remember the first morning I saw her, or maybe it's more honest to say, the first morning I noticed her. The lobby of the firm was all glass and marble, the kind of space that makes you whisper without realizing it. I was running late, heart pounding, shirt half tucked in, laptop bag cutting into my shoulder, and all I could think about was getting to the meeting before anyone realized the new intern had no sense of time management. But then, she smiled. She was behind the front desk, surrounded by neat stacks of paperwork, a mug that said, "Mondays don't scare me," and the soft hum of a desktop fan. Her eyes caught mine for a second, calm and steady, the kind of look that slows everything down around you. "You didn't sign in," she said, her tone carrying just enough amusement to make me stop in my tracks. Then, after a small pause, she added, "But I won't tell if you don't." It wasn't the words that got me. It was the way she said them, a quiet blend of authority and mischief, the kind that makes you straighten your posture without realizing why. Her voice was soft, low, not playful like someone trying to flirt, but warm, grounded, like she'd already lived through every kind of morning and learned which ones mattered. I laughed awkwardly, trying to find something clever to say back, but nothing came. So I just smiled and mumbled a thank you, my face probably redder than the visitor badge she handed me. When her fingers brushed mine as I took it, the touch was brief, nothing intentional, nothing romantic. But it lingered. Her hand was cool, her nails neatly polished in a neutral shade. That tiny contact left a quiet echo, something I couldn't quite name at the time. As I walked toward the elevators, I found myself glancing back once. She was looking down, typing something on her computer, the faintest smile still resting on her lips. Not for me, not for anyone in particular, just the kind of smile that comes naturally to someone who doesn't need attention to feel seen. The elevator doors closed, and in that short reflection of polished metal, I caught my own expression, half nervous, half curious. I'd worked in offices before, met people older, younger, louder, quieter. But something about her, the calm, the confidence, the unspoken grace, felt different. Like standing near a fireplace on a cold day. You don't touch it, you just feel the warmth and suddenly realize how cold you were before. When the meeting ended an hour later, I walked through the lobby again. She looked up, just once, as I passed. Our eyes met, barely a heartbeat's worth of contact, and she gave that same knowing smile. It wasn't an invitation. It wasn't even a question. But somehow, it felt like the beginning of something I didn't yet understand, and couldn't stop thinking about. After that first morning, I told myself it was nothing. Just a brief moment. A polite smile, a small joke shared between strangers. But that kind of lie doesn't last long. Because when something, or someone, leaves an echo in your mind, it always finds its way back. Over the next few weeks, I found reasons to be in the lobby more often than I needed to be. A forgotten document, an early arrival, a late submission, all harmless excuses. And every time I walked in, she was there. Always composed, always grounded, with that same quiet smile that made the place feel less like an office and more like a pause in the day. She had a way of greeting people that was effortless. Her "good morning" sounded different depending on who it was for, professional for the executives, kind for the delivery guys, and something softer for me. Or maybe I just wanted to believe that. I began to notice the details. How she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, how she bit her lips slightly before answering a phone call, how her perfume carried the faint scent of jasmine when she leaned forward to hand me a visitor badge. Sometimes, when the lobby was quiet, we'd talk. Nothing personal, not yet. Just little fragments of the day. She'd complain that the coffee machine was acting up again, or that the air conditioning was too cold. I'd joke about how the architects upstairs treated deadlines like myths. She'd laugh, that light, controlled laugh that hinted at restraint. There was one morning I remember especially. I dropped my pen while signing in, and as I reached down to pick it up, she did too. Our hands brushed, a brief touch, skin against skin. It was nothing, and yet everything. I caught her looking at me afterward, just a glance, quick enough to deny if questioned, but long enough to feel. The kind of look that doesn't shout but lingers quietly, like a thought she shouldn't be having. After that, something shifted. We didn't speak about it, but there was an understanding, a subtle awareness that colored every interaction. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore, it carried weight. Some days, she'd greet me with her usual calm. Other days, there was a faint hesitation in her tone, as if she was reminding herself, this means nothing. But then I'd catch her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking. That small, unguarded moment said everything her words never would. I started timing my arrivals to her shifts. I told myself it was coincidence, but even lies have a pattern. One evening, as I was leaving, she called out softly, "You forgot to sign out." When I turned, she was smiling again, the same smile from that first day. Only this time, there was something behind it. A flicker of recognition, of shared secrecy. And as I walked away, that smile stayed with me longer than it should have. A quiet promise neither of us dared to name why it had been raining since noon. The kind of steady, endless drizzle that makes the world look softer, quieter, almost fragile. Most of the office had already emptied out by the time I finished the drawings I'd been working on. The hum of the fluorescent lights felt louder than usual, echoing in the still corridors. When I stepped into the lobby, I expected to find it empty. But there she was, still at her desk, her hair loosely tied back, glasses perched on the edge of her nose, a soft glow from the desk lamp falling across her face. The rain outside made ripples on the glass behind her, and for a moment, she looked like a painting, calm, unbothered by the chaos of the world beyond the window. "You're still here?" I asked. She looked up, smiling lightly. "Someone's got to make sure the interns sign out properly." I laughed, a small, genuine laugh that came easier around her. "Guilty," I said, lifting my hands in surrender. Then the thunder rolled, deep and close, and I glanced at the downpour outside. "Guess I'll be here a while." Didn't bring an umbrella. She looked at the window, then back at me. "There's coffee in the break room," she said, gesturing toward the small kitchenette behind her. "If you don't mind terrible instant coffee and even worse company." Her tone was teasing, but her eyes, they were softer than usual. Inviting, even. We sat by the window, paper cups between us, steam curling upward like a quiet secret. The rain kept its rhythm, tapping softly against the glass. For a while, we didn't talk much. Just small things, how she preferred winter over summer, how I hated early mornings. Her laugh was quieter tonight, almost hesitant, as if each sound had to be earned. Then, somewhere between sips and silence, she said, "You remind me of my son when he was your age." It should have felt like a distance, a wall being gently rebuilt. But instead, her voice carried something tender, nostalgia, maybe, the kind that comes with both love and loss. I looked at her then, really looked. There were fine lines at the corner of her eyes, a touch of fatigue that came from years of giving more than she received. But she carried it with grace, like someone who had learned not to expect too much and yet still offered warmth freely. "Do you miss him?" I asked. "Every day," she said, her gaze fixed on the rain. "But life moves. We learned to stop asking it to slow down." The silence after that wasn't uncomfortable. It was shared, real. When she finally turned to me, the reflection of the city lights shimmered in her eyes. "You should go before it gets worse," she whispered. But I didn't move. Not for a moment. Because in that quiet lobby, with the rain and the smell of cheap coffee and the weight of everything unsaid between us, I realized something had changed. It wasn't about admiration anymore. It was about wanting to stay. The days after that evening felt different. Not louder, not busier, just different. Something had quietly shifted between us, though neither of us mentioned it. Our conversations were shorter now, more careful. The lightness that once floated between us had turned into something heavier, quieter, like the air before a storm. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just a strange kind of comfort that had gone too far. But every time I saw her, standing behind that desk with her calm composure and gentle voice, I felt it again. That pull. The one I couldn't explain or escape. One morning, I walked in as usual, expecting her familiar smile. Instead, I found her turned away, speaking to a colleague. Her laugh, genuine, unguarded, echoed through the lobby. And it hit me harder than I expected. When she noticed me, her expression softened back into professionalism. "Good morning," she said, her tone polite, distant. That was the first time I felt the space between us. Later that day, I overheard someone in the hallway mention her name. Something about her divorce being finalized last year, her son starting college soon. Their tone was casual, but to me, every word landed heavy. Pieces of her life I'd never asked about, because I didn't know if I had the right to. It made me realize how little I actually knew her, and yet how much she'd already come to mean. The next time we spoke, I noticed the tiredness in her eyes. The kind that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from carrying too much alone. She handed me a folder, our fingers almost touching, but this time she pulled away first. "Busy week?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She gave a small smile. "Always." Then, after a pause, "Don't you have somewhere else to be?" It stung, though I knew she didn't mean it cruelly. She was protecting something. Maybe herself, maybe me. There was a pause between us, long enough for both of us to hear what wasn't being said. I wanted to ask her why she was pulling away. I wanted to tell her that her absence lingered more than her presence ever did. But the words caught somewhere in my throat. Because how do you confess something that isn't supposed to exist? That evening, as I left the building, I glanced back through the glass doors. She was there, alone again, closing up her desk. Her hands moved with quiet precision, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought she looked up, as if she'd felt me watching. Our eyes met through the reflection of the glass. She gave a faint, weary smile, and then turned away. It wasn't rejection. It wasn't invitation either. It was something in between, that fragile space where feelings begin to bloom, but neither heart dares to claim them. And as the doors closed behind me, I understood something uncomfortably true. Sometimes, the hardest part of wanting someone is not being allowed to ask why you do. The end came quietly, the way most important things do. No announcement, no final scene. Just a calendar reminder that my internship would be over on Friday. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. People leave offices every day. But each morning that week felt heavier, as if time itself was slowing down just enough to make me aware of everything I was about to lose. She didn't seem different. Still behind that same desk, her smile as composed as ever, her tone calm and professional. But there was something in her eyes, a knowing softness, maybe, or the beginning of distance. I couldn't tell. I wanted to tell her it was my last week, to thank her for the small kindnesses she probably didn't even remember. But each time I approached the desk, the words died in my throat. What was I supposed to say? "You made an office lobby feel like home." No. Some things are better left unspoken. On my final morning, I got there early. The building was still waking up, the smell of coffee, the echo of footsteps, the soft hum of computers coming to life. She was already there, as always. "Early start today," she said without looking up. "Yeah, last day." That made her pause. Her pen hovered midair before she set it down gently. "Oh," she said quietly. "Already?" I nodded. She smiled, polite, measured. "Then I guess I'll have to make sure you sign out properly this time." It was a joke, but her voice cracked ever so slightly on the last word. I caught it. She knew I did. Neither of us mentioned it. The day passed like a blur of handshakes and polite goodbyes. I kept glancing toward the lobby, hoping she'd look up, wave, give me something to hold on to. But she was busy, or pretending to be. I couldn't tell which hurt more. By the time I packed the last folder into my bag, the office was quiet again. I made my way down to the lobby one final time. Her desk was empty. A half-drunk cup of tea sat beside her keyboard, and a sticky note on the monitor read, "Out for lunch." I stood there for a long time, longer than I should have. Maybe hoping she'd walk in and say one last thing, anything. But the minutes stretched and the silence deepened, and it became clear this was my goodbye. I placed my visitor badge on the counter, where she usually slid it toward me with that soft smile. It looked oddly lifeless there, just a piece of plastic without meaning. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the glass doors, standing in the same spot where it all began. Only now, the lobby felt colder, emptier. I walked out into the late afternoon sun, the weight of unspoken words pressing against my chest. No final glance. No goodbye. Just the quiet realization that sometimes, the people who change us most are the ones we never get to tell. Time, I learned, doesn't erase people. It just buries them beneath layers of busyness, until something small, something ordinary, brushes the dust away. For me, that moment came nearly 8 months later. I was at a client's networking event, one of those formal evenings filled with handshakes, wine glasses, and polite laughter that never reached anyone's eyes. The kind of place where you wear a suit that doesn't feel like yours and nod at conversations you'll forget by morning. And then I heard her voice. It was faint, half lost under the hum of chatter, but unmistakable. Calm. Steady. That tone I hadn't realized I'd memorized. I turned. And there she was, standing near the balcony, her back to me, speaking to someone with quiet grace. She looked the same, yet different. The same poise, the same elegance in how she carried herself, but softer somehow. Her hair was shorter now, and she wore a deep navy dress that shimmered faintly when the light touched it. I didn't move at first. I just stood there, frozen, watching her laugh at something, her hand brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the same small gesture that had once undone me completely. When she finally noticed me, her expression changed in a heartbeat. Surprise. Then something else, recognition wrapped in warmth. And then, the smile. That same smile that started it all. "You didn't sign in tonight either," she said when I reached her, her voice carrying that familiar mix of amusement and affection. I couldn't help but laugh. Guess some habits never change. She tilted her head, studying me. "You look different," she said. "More settled. Older," I teased. "Maybe just more sure of yourself." There was silence after that. Not awkward, just full. The kind that hums with the weight of everything unsaid. Around us, the event moved on. Laughter, music, glasses clinking. But for a moment, it felt like the two of us were standing outside of time. We found a quiet corner near the balcony, away from the crowd. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain and jasmine, the same perfume she used to wear. "I thought you left the firm," I said. "I did," she replied. "New start. Different pace." Her gaze drifted to the city lights below. "You?" I stayed. "Got hired full-time." She smiled faintly. "I'm glad. You were always meant to build things." Her words lingered, as if she didn't just mean buildings. We talked for a long time, about work, life, her son, my projects. But underneath every word was that quiet current we'd never named. At one point, she looked at me and said softly, "I missed our talks." And before I could answer, she added, "I told myself it was nothing. But I still remember every morning you walked through those doors." Her eyes glistened, not from tears, but from honesty. And in that single moment, amid the laughter, the city, the glow of old affection returning, I realized that sometimes what we lose isn't gone. It just waits, quietly, for us to come back. When the event finally ended, most people had already drifted away, their laughter fading into the hum of the city outside. But she and I stayed behind, lingering near the balcony, the way people do when they're not quite ready to say goodbye. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of rain on concrete and the faint trace of her perfume. Jasmine again, subtle and steady. Streetlights shimmered below, painting the wet pavement in gold. She crossed her arms lightly, rubbing them for warmth. Without thinking, I slipped off my jacket and held it out. "Here," I said softly. She hesitated for a heartbeat, eyes flicking to mine. A quiet, questioning look, then took it. "You always were polite," she murmured, pulling it around her shoulders. "It's not politeness," I said. "It's just what feels right." She smiled then. That gentle, knowing kind of smile that never quite reached her lips, but lived in her eyes instead. We stood side by side, silent for a long time. The world below moved on. Cars passing, a distant siren, a faint trace of music from the bar across the street. But up there, it felt suspended. "Still, you know," she said finally, her voice quiet. "I used to wonder if you'd ever come back. Not because you had to, just because you wanted to." I looked at her, the way the wind brushed a strand of hair against her cheek, the way the city lights softened her features. She wasn't the same woman I'd first met behind that desk. There was something lighter about her now. Or maybe I was just seeing her more clearly. "I did," I said. "A few times. Just not when you were there." She nodded, as if she'd expected that. "Sometimes, it's easier to miss someone quietly," she said. "That way, it doesn't break anything." Her words settled between us like mist, delicate, real. I wanted to say 1,000 things. That she made the ordinary days feel like stories. That every time it rained, I thought of that coffee in the lobby. That I'd carried her voice, her steadiness, like a compass through everything that came after. But instead, I just said, "You changed how I see things." She turned to me, eyes soft but unreadable. "Maybe that's enough," she whispered. And somehow it was. When we finally walked out together, the night was calm. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets shining under the lamplight. Our hands brushed once, twice, before finding each other naturally. Neither of us said anything about it. As we reached the corner where we'd part ways, she looked up at me and smiled again. That first day smile reborn, older now, wiser, but still carrying the same quiet warmth. "You didn't sign in tonight," she said softly, teasing but tender. I looked at her, the corners of my mouth lifting. "I don't need to," I said. "I'm already where I wanted to be." She laughed, low, genuine, filled with something like peace. And as she turned to leave, I realized love doesn't always arrive with promises or grand gestures. Sometimes it's just a moment, shared, understood, and enough. The kind of love that doesn't ask for permission. It just stays, quietly, beautifully, long after the last goodbye. 4.